right on time with zero delays. I'm going to tell you everything that I read last year. Specifically the manga, but I'm going to mention the books too. How the fuck do I make a Manga Tuesday again? I forget. Baka, hey, Manga Tuesday. Welcome back to Manga Tuesday, episode 179, I think. I'm the notorious DRC. And today I will be doing my manga reading log for 2024. I'll be going through month by month, day by day, and just telling you, just listing off everything that I read. But I'll also be mentioning any books or comics I read, but it's mostly manga. And it'll just be a chill video to relax to and watch. So without further ado, yeah. Starting off the year on January 16th, I read Breasts Are My Favourite Things in the World Volume 7 and Sakurai-san Wants to Be Noticed Volume 1. On January 19th, I read Watamote Chapter 220 Part 1 and Sakurai-san Wants to Be Noticed Volume 2. January 21st, I read Sakurai-san Wants to Be Noticed Volume 3 and Maid Skater Chapter 2. And on January 29th, I read Sakurai-san Wants to Be Noticed Volume 4, which completes that series, and that completes the month of January. What a shit month to start. So for January, I read 5 mangas, 2 chapters and 0 books, which is an average of 0.161 manga per day. The averages only include mangas, it doesn't include chapters or books. And we'll do a quick little monthly recap at the end of each month. Starting off February, on February 1st, I read Watamote Chapter 220 Part 2, and I read No Matter What You Say, Fury-san is Scary, Volume 5, which completes that series. February 4th, I read Kaguhara's Fetish Notebook Chapter 10. On the 7th of Feb, I read Vinland Saga Chapter 208 and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojolion, Volume 1. February 8th, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojolion, Volume 2. February 9th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volume 3. February 10th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 4 and 5. On February 11th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 6 and 7. On February 12th, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Volumes 8 and 9. On February 13th, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojolion, Volume 10. February 14th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 11, 12, 13 and 14. On February 15th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 15, 16, 17, and 18. February 16th, I read JoJo's Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 19, 20, and 21. The 17th of Feb, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Volume 22. And on the 18th of February, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojolion, Volume, can you take a guess? What number comes next? Were you paying attention? Volume 23. On February 20th, I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 8, Jojolion, Volumes 24, 25, 26, and 27. And that completes Part 8 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. February 21st, I read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk, Volume 1. It's a very good little manga. February 22nd, I read Watamote Chapter 220 still, but Part 3, and I also read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk, Volumes 2 and 3. February 23rd, I read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk, Volumes 4 and 5. February 24th, I read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk Volume 6, and I also read Vinland Saga Chapter 209. Then on February 25th, I read Crossplay Love Otaku X Punk Volume 7. On Feb 26th, I read Hitomi-chan is Shy with Strangers Volume 7. On the 27th of Feb, I read By Hero one shot, so it's a one and doneski. And then on February 28th, I read Laid Back Camp, Volume 14, and that completes the month of holy shit, it's a leap year, motherfucker. And on February 29th, I reread Our Wonderful Days, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, which is the complete series, but I'd read it before, so this was a reread, and now that completes the month of February. So for February, I read 40 manga. That is an average of 1.379 a day. I also read 6 chapters and still 0 books. Also, with the manga, I think I forgot to mention, I break it down. So if there's an omnibus, like a 2-in-1 omnibus, I will count those 2 volumes. Usually when I'm like counting my collection numbers, I won't, but for the reading thing, it just seems to make more sense. Don't question it, or I will slaughter you. Anyway, that's our February recap. March will be a quicker recap, even quicker. Okay, I apologise. On March 1st, I read Catch These Hands, Volume 1. March 2nd, I read Catch These Hands, Volume 2. Then on March 3rd, I read Catch These Hands, Volume 3 and Volume 4. Oh, and that completes Catch These Hands. So cute little Yui. Is cute the right word to describe this one? Probably not really. I mean, it is, but it, whatever. We're not supposed to talk about the series. We're just supposed to read them very robotically. It's just pure statistics, this video. Anyways, on March 4th, I read Kawa! By the great Akira Toriyama, and that's a one and done single volume. 5th of March, I read Gabriel Dropout, Volume 13, and I read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 9, The JoJo Lands, Volume 1. On March 6th, I read JoJo's Part 9, Volume 2, and I started reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with the first short story, The Empty House. March 7th, I read Watamote Chapter 221, and I read JoJo's Part 9, Volume 3. On March 9th, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with The Norwood Builder. March 10th, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock with The Dancing Men. March 11th, I read Chasing After Aokishiba, Volume 1. Then on March 12th, I read Chasing After Aokishiba Volumes 2, 3, and 4, which completes that Yuri series, and I continued reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with The Solitary Cyclist. It's a collection of short stories, The Return of Sherlock, so I'm reading like a full short story on the days I read it, you see, so if you don't understand what the hell I'm blabbering about, I think you did. But anyways, on March 13th, I read Dragon Ball Super, Volume 20. March 15th, I read I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl, Volume 5, and I continued reading The Return of Sherlock with The Priory School. Then on March 16th, I read Library Wars, Volumes 1 and 2. March 18th, I read Library Wars, Volume 3. March 19th, I read JoJo's Part 9, JoJo Lands, Chapter 13, and I also read Library Wars Volume 4. March 20th, I read Library Wars Volumes 5 and 6. March 21st, I read Library Wars Volume 7. On March 22nd, I read The Return of Sherlock Holmes. I continued reading it with the short story Black Peter. Black Peter. And on March 24th, I read Library Wars Volumes 8 and 9. March 25th, I read Library Wars Volumes 10, and I continued reading the show with the short story Charles Augustus Milverton. March 26th, I read Library Wars Volume 11. On the 28th of March, I read Watamote Chapter 222 Part 1, and I continued reading The Return of Sherlock with The Six Napoleons. March 29th, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock with the 3 students, and I also read Library Wars Volume 12. On March 30th, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with the Golden Pince-Nez. Am I an idiot? Anyways, on March 31st, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with The Missing Three-Quarter, and that completes the month of March. So for March, I read 27 manga, an average of 1. Wait, that's not the right average. Wait, I can look up the calc. Wait, let me pull up the calc real quick. Calc's, for anyone new here, calc's short for calculator. If you didn't know, I'm just using slang, guys. But let me recalculate that. I obviously did it the wrong way around. Yeah, so March I read 27 manga with an average of 0.871 volumes per day, 3 chapters, and we started reading our first book, but we only read 0.8 books because I didn't quite finish all of The Return of Sherlock Holmes yet. But maybe next month. Let's see. Whatever. So starting off April, on April 11th, I read Watamote Chapter 222, Part 2. April 15th, I continued reading The Return of Sherlock with the Abbey Grange. April 19th, I read the Jojo Lands Chapter 14. The 23rd of April, I read Kaguhara's Fetish Notebook Chapter 11. April 25th, I read Watamote Chapter 222, Part 3. And on April 27th, I read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk, Volume 8. Then on April 28th, I believe I finished reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes with the last short story, The Second Stain, and I also read Vinland Saga Chapter 210, and that also completes the month of April. So for April, I read 1 manga volume, only 1 volume, which is an average of 0.033 volumes per day. But I did read 5 chapters, and I read 0.2 books. So it's probably even worse in January, but. Let's keep going. Starting off May, on May 2nd, I read Library Wars Volume 13. Then on the 4th of May, I read Library Wars Volumes 14 and 15, and that completes Library Wars. Then over on May 13th, I read Lady Red, which is a very, very, very short one-shot by Akira Toriyama, so that's also complete. Ski. May 17th, I read Jojo Lands Chapter 15. Then on May 18th, I started reading The Stranger. On May 19th, I read Kasi-san and Yamada Volume 3 it was. Yes indeed. Then on May 22nd, I continued reading The Stranger. On the 23rd of May, I read Watamote Chapter 223. Whoa. I also continued reading The Stranger. On May 24th, I also continued reading The Stranger. And on May 25th, I finished reading The Stranger. And I also read See You Tomorrow at the Food Court, Volume 1. On the 26th of May, I read Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, Volumes 10 and Volumes 11. Why am I speaking like this? On May 27th, I read Vinland Saga, Chapter 211, and I also read Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible, Volume 12, and that completes Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible. But for May, we also have May 30th, which I read Sirius Twin Stars, which is technically maybe not a manga, because I think it's actually a Spanish original manga. I don't know what they call them, but this is a singular volume series, so this is one and done ski. It's a complete ski, and that also completes the month of May. So for May, I read 9 volumes, which is 0.29 average per day, 3 chapters. I read 1 book. Woohoo! Let's move on to June. June begins on June 2nd with Reversible, Volume 1. On June 4th, I read See You Tomorrow at the Food Court, chapters 16 and 17. June 5th, I read See You Tomorrow at the Food Court, chapters 18 and 20. June 6th, I read See You Tomorrow at the Food. June 6th, I read See You Tomorrow at the Food Court, chapters 21 and 22, and I also read Reversible, Volume 2. June 7th, I read Reversible, Volume 3, and that completes Reversible. On June 10th, I started reading To Me, the One Who Loved You. It's a book, a light novel, I believe they call it. June 11th, I continued reading To Me, the One Who Loved You. And then on June 12th, I finished reading To Me, the One Who Loved You. June 13th, I read the Watamote special chapter in between release, and I also started reading the companion light novel To Every You I've Loved Before. June 14th, I continued reading To Every You I've Loved Before, and on June 15th, I finished reading To Every You I've Loved Before. Then over on the 16th of June, I read When Will Ayumu Make His Move, Volume 13 and Volume 14 and Volume 15. June 19th, I read The JoJo Lands, Chapter 16 and Monologue Woven for You, Volume 1. June 20th, I read Watamote, Chapter 224, Part 1, and I read Monologue Woven for You, Volumes 2 and 3, which completes that series. On the 21st of June, I read Sweet Guilty Love Bites, which is a one-and-donesky Yuri, so it is also complete. June 22nd, I read Hitomi-chan is Shy with Strangers, Volume 8, and I started reading 3 Days of Happiness. 23rd of June, I continued reading 3 Days of Happiness. 24th of June, I also continued reading 3 Days of Happiness. On the 25th of June, I finished reading 3 Days of Happiness, and I also read Kagahara's Fetish Notebook, Chapter 12. June 26th, I read Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagataro, Volume 16, and then I read Phoenix, Volume 1, and I also read Vinland Saga, Chapter 212. On June 27th, I read Turns Out My Dick Was a Cute Girl, Chapter 28. On the 28th of June, I read Phoenix, Volume 2. And then on June 29th, I read Phoenix, Volume 3, and that completes the month of June. So in June, I read 17 volumes of manga, which is an average of 0.567 volumes per day. Also read 13 chapters, and I read 3 books. Big month for books. June was a big month for actual books. I also need to go drink some water real quickly before I finish recording. I feel my voice dissipating. I've watered up and my voice is re-energized and I'm ready to go, although it didn't really help that much. My voice still feels sore, but I'll continue anyways. And July begins on July 3rd, where I read my first comic of the year. I read Sonic, Seasons of Chaos. And I also read Phoenix, Volume 4. July 4th, I read Phoenix, Volume 5. July 7th, I read Phoenix, Volume 6. On July 8th, I read another comic. What the heck? I read SpongeBob Comics, Issue 1. 12th of July, I read Watamote, Chapter 224, Part 2. And on July 13th, I read School Zone Girls, Volume 1. It's really good. July 16th, I read Grace Rosa, Volume 1. But even though it's labelled Volume 1, it's actually a one-and-done-ski. I think the series may have been cancelled, but it also has an actual end. They rushed an ending, so it's ended. So it's complete ski. It's finished. And on July 19th, I read The JoJo Lands, Chapter 17. July 20th, I started reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which is the first Oz novel. July 21st, I continued reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. July 22nd, I continued reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. On the 23rd of July, I continued reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And on July 28th, what What a special day. I read Yotsuba chapter 113, and that completes the month of July. So for July, I read, only 5 manga volumes with an average of 0.161 volumes per day. 3 chapters. I read half a book, and I read 2 comics. Interesting. August begins on August 1st, and it begins with the Watamote Summer Break Special Chapter. Then all the way on August 9th, I read the Watamote Summer Break Special 2 chapter. There was a second one. And then all the way on August 15th, I read Watamote chapter 224, part 3. On the 22nd of August, I read the JoJo Lands chapter 18. I don't know why I said it like that, I'm sorry. On the 26th of August, I read Vinland Saga chapter 213. And on August 30th, I read the 3rd Watamote Summer Break Special Chapter. And I also read Crossplay Love, Otaku X Punk Volume 9. And then that completes the month of August. So for August, apparently I only read 1 manga volume, which is an average of 0.032 volumes per day. But I read 6 chapters and I read 0 books. Wowzers. We didn't start September until September 10th, but on that day, I read Kaguhara's Fetish Notebook Chapter 13. I also read Breasts Are My Favourite Things in the World Volume 8, which completes that series, and I also read Teasing Master Dagaki-san Volumes 18 and 19. On September 11th, I read School Zone Girls Volumes 2 and 3. On September 12th, just a regular day, I read School Zone Girls Volume 4 and 5, which kind of completes the series. I believe it's actually officially on hiatus. There's no actual ending, but so I believe the mangaka is intending to come back to the manga at some point and continue it. But it's been a while, so it could be just a series left in the void, which is a shame because it's good. But I'm not supposed to be talking about the series here, I'm just supposed to be reading this list, so I will shut up now and read the next day, which was September 13th, on which I read Slumbering Beauty, Volumes 1 and 2, and that does complete that series, for real, for real. 17th of September, I read I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl, Volume 6, and I continued reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The Oz came back, what the heck? September 19th, I read a Watamote chapter 225. No part 1, no part 2, just the whole chapter. And I also finally finished reading The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Then on September 22nd, I read Homunculus, the volumes 1 to 2 omnibus. All of Homunculus is like 2-in-1 omnibuses, but they're actually not 2-in-1 because it's actually more than that. It's whatever. Just go to the next day, idiot. The 23rd of September, I read Homunculus, volume 3 to 4 omnibus, and I started reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. September 24th, I read Homunculus, volume 5 to 6, and I continued reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. On the 25th of September, I read Vinland Saga, chapter 214, and that's all. September 26th, I read Homunculus, volumes 7 to 8, omnibus thingamajig. And on the 27th of September, I read Homunculus, volume 9 to 10, 2-in-1 omnibus, and that completes Homunculus, and that completes the month of September. For September, I read 25 mangas, which was an average of 0.833 volumes per day. I also read 3 chapters, and I read about 0.7 books. Kicking off October, on October 2nd, I read Cheerful Amnesia, Volume 1. October 5th, I read Cheerful Amnesia Volume 2, and I reread Hunter x Hunter Volume 37. Then on October 6th, I reread the 10 chapters that would come to make up Hunter x Hunter Volume 38. And finally on October 7th, I read Hunter x Hunter Chapter 401. Ooh, new Hunter x Hunter chapters have entered the reading log again. On October 10th, I read Watamote, chapter 226, part 1, and I read Cheerful Amnesia, volume 3, and I continued reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. The 11th of October, I read Mermaid Scales and the Town of Sand. It's a 2-in-1 omnibus, so that completes that series. October 12th, I continued reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. October 13th, I continued reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. October 14th, I read Hunter x Hunter chapter 402, and I finished reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Then all the way over on October 21st, I read Hunter x Hunter chapter 403. On the 23rd of October, I read Cheerful Amnesia volume 4, and I started reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. October 24th, I continued reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. October 25th, I read Vinland Saga, chapter 215. October 28th, I read Hunter x Hunter, chapter 404. October 30th, I continued reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. And on October 31st, I read Watamote, chapter 226, part 2, and that completes the month of October. So for October, I read 8 volumes, which is an average of 0.258 per day. I also read 7 chapters and 1.3 books. Approximately. Yes, indeed, approximately. Definitely. Kicking off November, on November 2nd, I continued reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. November 3rd, I continued reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. November 4th, I read Hunter x Hunter, chapter 405, and I finally finished reading Riku Can't Be a Goddess. On November 8th, I read When Will Ayamu Make His Move, volumes 16 and 17, and I believe that completes that series. November 10th, I read Hitomi-chan is Shy with Strangers, volume 9. On November 11th, I read Hunter x Hunter, chapter 406, and I started reading At Night I Become a Monster. On November 12th, I continued reading At Night I Become a Monster by the great Yoru Sumino. November 13th, I continued reading At Night I Become a Monster by the great Yoru Sumino still. On November 14th, I read Watamote, chapter 226, part 3. November 18th, I read Hunter x Hunter, chapter 407, and I finished reading At Night I Become a Monster. A very good little book. On November 20th, I read Chainsaw Man, volumes 1, 2, and 3. On November 21st, I read Chainsaw Man, volume 4. And on November 25th, I read Hunter x Hunter, chapter 408, and Vinland Saga, chapter 216, and that completes the month of, what month? November. It completes November. Fuck me. For November, I read 7 manga volumes, an average of 0.233 recurring volumes per day. I also read 6 chapters and 1.5 books, and we've only got 1 more month to go, so let's just fucking go. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick though. I'll let you listen though. December began on December 2nd, and on December 2nd I read Hunter x Hunter chapter 409. I also read Chainsaw Man volumes 5, 6, 7 and 8, and I also read Crossplay Love Otaku X Punk volume 10. And on December 3rd I read Chainsaw Man volume 9. December 4th I read Chainsaw Man volumes 10 and 11, which completes part 1 of Chainsaw Man, and I also read Laid Back Camp volume 15. On the 9th of December I read Hunter x Hunter chapter 410. I also read I Don't Need a Happy Ending, a collection of short stories, a collection of Yui short stories, so that's a one and doneski. I read all of that, and I also started reading Penguin Highway, another book, my last book for the year perhaps. On December 12th, I just read Watamote, chapter 227. And then on the 16th of December, I continued reading Penguin Highway. And I also read The Whole of Humanity Has Gone Yui Except Me. I think it's a 2-in-1 omnibus volume. But yeah, I read all of it, and that completes that series. And that actually completes the month of December, which in turn that actually completes the year of 2024. Yeah, so for December I only read 12 volumes, an average of 0.387 volumes per day. Read 3 chapters and I only read 0.25 books. Penguin Highway was my last book of the year, but I didn't even get halfway through it, so I'll have to finish it next year. Anyway, let's go back to non-voiceover mode, and just to talk about a few final statistics and a few final thoughts of what I thought of this year. They aren't too good thoughts. They're not very good thoughts, but we'll sort of wrap things up. You know what I mean. Let's just fucking get on with it. Alrighty, so for the entire year I read 157 volumes of manga, which is an average of 0.429 a day. I read 60 chapters. I read 9.25 books because I did not finish Penguin Highway. I read, it says 1 comic, but I think I read 2. I read that Sonic one and that stupid short SpongeBob one. I also had 163 days I spent reading just something, anything, if it was 1 chapter or it was just 10 volumes, which in turn means there was, 203 days where I didn't read anything. Yeah. I also read this many Yuri manga series over the year, approximately, if I bothered to check that stat in post. Anyways, yeah, I mean, overall it was a pretty terrible year. I thought I was over this. 2021 in particular was a really bad year. I felt like I barely read anything, and I was just wasting so much time. I could have spent wasting the time doing things I enjoy, and so that's the whole reason I started keeping track of what I read. Was in 2022 to try and inspire myself to read more, and I enjoyed keeping track of it and then being able to look back at it, and it did inspire me to read more. And then 2023 I continued it, and I thought it had become a habit again. It was just, something I would do. I would continue to read more and more, and then this year I just, for way too many long extended periods of time, I just didn't read anything. I just slipped back into my old ways that I thought were behind me, but I guess it's just whatever is wrong up here. It's a battle that I'll never be over. They'll never get a point where I'll just be over it. I gotta keep always working at it. Keep making the effort to actually... I gotta make an effort to actually do things that I want to do, and not just sit around doing nothing, wasting away. So it's an eternal battle. I'll never get to a point where it's just second nature, and yeah, it's this past year was not a good year in a lot of ways. There was some ways it was, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I just thought, yeah. I don't know. I'm going to try and get back on track. Try and make more of an effort to actually read more and more consistently like I want to and like I enjoy doing this coming year. Although the first month that's already gone past hasn't been great for that. But it's been great in a lot of other ways. I feel like I'm on the precipice of making a turn in my existence, even if it's an ever so gradual Titanic ship turning circle that takes a long time to even begin to turn. It's something. So I don't know. Yeah. reading wise, particularly last year, was terrible. And like I said, I thought I was past that. I thought, but I'm not. The things in my brain that make me, I want to read this today, but I can't be bothered starting reading this. Is it the right time? I got to do this thing later, so I don't want to do this thing now. I'll just sit around and wait and do nothing, and I'll just read that tomorrow. I'll start reading again tomorrow. Maybe next week. I'll start reading again next week, and this month will just be like kind of an off month. This whole fucking year will just be an off fucking year. I'm fucking sick of it, but I guess the what I've learnt is I can't become complacent. I must constantly be working at it my entire rest of my life. But it's okay because I don't plan on ever dying, so I've got a long time to work on it. Anyways, I'm sort of just rambling incoherently. It's, I don't know if I'm getting the point that I'm trying to get across or not. Maybe if I made this video weeks ago like I planned, when the thoughts were fresher in my head, I would have got to them. But I'm just wasting time now. So I guess I'll wrap things up, and hopefully this coming year will be a better year and whatnot. So anyway, thanks for watching. And as always, as of the start of this year, I was 124.2 kilograms. And my goal by the end of this year is to be under 90 kilograms. So, you know, I don't know where else to state that, so I've stated it here. And now that I've stated it publicly, we shall see what happens or what doesn't happen.
It's just another Tuesday. Tuesday. And if you were in for a spell where it falls into an order, you can help that. Well, yeah. No.
Right on time with 0 delays. I'm going to redo that intro.